What if I told you that we have been playing this strange game all our lives? We find our center, our peace, our still point in the turning world, and then, remarkably, we feel compelled to explain it, defend it, justify it to those who live in perpetual chaos. But here's the thing. Peace needs no justification. Think about it. A flower does not apologize for blooming, and a mountain does not explain why it stands tall. You see, when you seek approval for your tranquility from those who worship disorder, you have already surrendered it. The universe itself maintains perfect balance without ever once stopping to ask permission. Why should you? We are, all of us, conditioned to believe that our inner states require external validation. That somehow, if others do not understand our peace, it becomes illegitimate. What a peculiar idea. Have you ever watched a lake on a still morning? It does not send messengers to the storm clouds explaining why it chooses to be calm. The stillness is complete unto itself, requiring no defense, no justification, no explanation. Yet here we are, composing elaborate arguments for why we choose tranquility over turmoil. Let me tell you something about these chaotic people we keep trying to convince. They are not merely people who disagree with us. They are individuals who have become so identified with disturbance that stillness itself feels threatening. Their inner worlds spin and churn like perpetual hurricanes, and from within that storm, your calm appears incomprehensible, perhaps even offensive. But does the offense lie with you or with the storm? The tranquil center of a spinning galaxy never attempts to rationalize its stillness to the stars whirling around its edges. That would be a profound misunderstanding of the nature of things. You see, there is a fundamental difference between explaining and justifying. Explaining is sharing wisdom. Justifying is seeking permission. One flows outward as a gift, the other reaches outward as a plea. When we justify our peace to chaotic people, we subtly acknowledge that our tranquility requires their endorsement. We place our inner harmony on trial before judges who have never experienced it themselves. How could they possibly render a fair verdict? It would be like asking someone who has never tasted sweetness to judge a honey competition. The very premise is flawed. Think about it. In nature, we never see this strange phenomenon. The deep roots of an ancient tree do not send representatives to debate with the wind about the virtues of stability. The serene depths of the ocean never apologize to the turbulent surface waves for their calm. Each element of nature embodies its truth without hesitation or doubt. So why do we, conscious beings that we are, feel this peculiar need to defend our inner weather? Perhaps it stems from our deep interconnectedness, our natural desire for understanding and communion with others. This is beautiful, of course. Connection is the essence of life. But connection does not mean uniformity. It does not demand that your inner state conform to another's expectation or comprehension. You see, true peace is not an achievement to be credentialed or a position to be defended. It is a natural state of being that emerges when we stop resisting what is. And ironically, the very act of justifying our peace creates resistance, tension, and ultimately undermines the very tranquility we are trying to protect. When you find yourself explaining your center to someone who thrives in chaos, notice what happens. Feel how the very act of justification subtly pulls you from your center. Observe how your peace, which moments ago was self-evident, now seems to require evidence, as if it were on trial for its existence. There are several ways we surrender our peace to chaos, and each deserves careful attention. First, there is what I call the validation trap. This is where we believe our inner state is not legitimate until the most chaotic person in the room approves of it. We hold our peace tentatively, as if on probation, awaiting the verdict of those least qualified to judge it. The validation trap turns peace from a birthright into a permission slip that must be signed by chaos. I once knew someone who had found a beautiful meditation practice that brought him tremendous peace. Each morning, he would sit in silence for an hour, and from this simple practice flowed a remarkable clarity and tranquility that infused his entire day. But he had a friend. Oh, this friend was a tornado of a person, always in crisis, always in conflict. And my acquaintance spent hours trying to convince this human hurricane that his meditation was not escapism. He would explain the neurological benefits, cite spiritual traditions, even offer scientific studies. Each conversation left him drained, doubtful, and disconnected from the very peace he was defending. Think about it. What happens when you try to explain color to someone committed to blindness? The irony is exquisite. In trying to validate our peace, we invalidate it by making it conditional on another's understanding. The validation trap turns what is unconditional into something that depends on conditions. Second, we fall into the explanation spiral. This is our peculiar belief that if we just find the right words, the perfect metaphor, the chaotic person will finally understand our peace and join us there. We become peace evangelists, constantly refining our sermon to the unconverted. Each time our explanation fails, we do not question the premise of explaining. Instead, we simply craft a more elaborate explanation. I knew a woman who lived simply, needing very little to be content. Her family, driven by constant acquisition, found her lifestyle baffling, even threatening. At every gathering, they would question her choices, and she would respond with increasingly sophisticated explanations of minimalism, environmental ethics, and spiritual contentment. Year after year, the explanations grew more eloquent. Year after year, the family remained uncomprehending. Still, she persisted, believing the perfect explanation would finally bridge the unbridgeable gap. But what if chaos does not want peace? What if, for them, disturbance is the most familiar home? You see, explanation becomes justification when it carries the hidden agenda of conversion. A tree does not try to convince the wind to stand still. It simply remains rooted while allowing the wind its nature. Third, there is the boundary dissolution. This is perhaps the most subtle and dangerous surrender of all. Here, we gradually adjust our peace to make it more comprehensible to chaotic people. We introduce small disturbances, little compromises, thinking we are building bridges of understanding. But with each adjustment, our peace becomes less peace and more chaos. I knew a man who had established a beautiful creative practice that required 2 hours of solitude each morning. But his partner found this threatening, incomprehensible. So he began to justify it, then explain it, then compromise it. 15 minutes less, then 30, then creating with noise in the background. Soon, his practice existed in name only, and the peace it had brought him vanished. The boundary between your tranquility and another's chaos is not a negotiation table. It is a fact of nature, like the shoreline between land and sea. The ocean does not negotiate with the land about where one begins and the other ends. Fourth, we engage in preemptive justification. Here, we anticipate criticism of our peace and begin defending against it before it even arrives. We become so habituated to justifying our tranquility that we start doing it automatically, even when alone. Our inner dialogue becomes cluttered with imaginary arguments, defenses against unspoken criticisms, explanations for accusations not yet made. I once observed a friend who had found peace through simplifying his life. He lived contentedly, but whenever describing his choices, he would immediately add defensive caveats. No one had questioned him, yet he was already answering their unasked criticisms. His mind was populated with phantom judges, and he spent his energy defending against their imagined verdicts. Like a lake whose surface ripples before the wind even touches it, preemptive justification disturbs our peace in anticipation of disturbances that may never come. It is as if we keep ourselves slightly chaotic to be prepared for chaos. What strange logic this is. Now, I am not saying these patterns are easy to break, but let me tell you something about what happens when we truly stop justifying our peace. What if your peace is not a position to be defended, but a reality to be lived? What if the very act of justification creates the condition where peace needs defense? Consider this profound paradox. Every time you justify your tranquility, you tacitly agree that it requires justification. You validate the premise of its questionability. But what if peace is your natural state? What if, like gravity or sunlight, it simply is? When we step beyond the need for justification, we enter a domain of extraordinary liberation. This liberation does not come from convincing others that we are right. It emerges from releasing the belief that we need their understanding to be at peace. This is not selfishness. This is not isolation. This is the recognition of an elemental truth about the nature of consciousness itself. Your inner state exists prior to and independent of anyone's comprehension of it. A man I knew spent 20 years arguing with his family about his contemplative lifestyle. 20 years of holidays turned into debates, of phone calls transformed into defenses. Then one day, something shifted. He stopped explaining. When questioned, he would simply smile and say, "This is what works for me." No philosophy, no justification, no defense. They will push. They will push. They will push. But without your resistance, what are they pushing against? Without your justification, what are they arguing with? I saw this man recently, and there was something remarkable about him. His peace had deepened precisely because he no longer treated it as negotiable. The chaotic people in his life had not necessarily changed their views, but they had changed their approach to him. Some drifted away, finding his non-engagement unsatisfying. Others grew curious about this peace that needed no defense. What if your tranquility is not a position held, but a truth embodied? The most profound truths do not require advocates. They simply are. The earth does not campaign for the reality of gravity. It simply holds you, steadfast and unwavering, whether you acknowledge its pull or not. There is an extraordinary power in non-justification that we rarely discuss. When you stop explaining your peace, you stop reinforcing the illusion that it requires explanation. This is not a strategy to change others. It is a recognition that some things exist beyond the realm of debate, beyond the domain of persuasion. Your essential nature is one of these things. I knew a woman who spent decades trying to explain her spiritual practices to her analytical, skeptical partner. Year after year, she crafted increasingly sophisticated arguments, hoping to bridge what seemed an unbridgeable gap. Then one day, after a particularly exhausting discussion, she simply stopped. Not in anger, not in resignation, but in the clear recognition that her practice was not a proposition to be proven, but an experience to be lived. The change was immediate and profound. Without her constant justification, her practice deepened. It became more authentic, more integrated, more genuinely peaceful. And strangely, miraculously, her partner began to show curiosity about her practice. Not because she had finally found the perfect explanation, but because she had stopped explaining altogether. What if the peace you seek does not need to be created, but simply recognized? What if it is always already present, like the silence that underlies all sound, the stillness that enables all movement? Our justifications, our explanations, our defensive arguments are themselves disturbances of this fundamental peace. They are ripples on the surface of a pond that would, if left alone, naturally return to stillness. We have been conditioned to believe that our peace must be earned, achieved, and then defended. But look around you at the natural world. Does the sky work to be spacious? Does the mountain strive to be solid? Does the river effort to flow downhill? There is an effortlessness to the universe that we, in our human complexity, have forgotten. They will question, they will criticize, they will misunderstand. Let them. Their questioning, their criticism, their misunderstanding belong to them, not to you. The oak tree does not internalize the complaints of the wind. The ocean does not absorb the judgments of those who find it too vast, too deep, too wet. There is a revolutionary quality to unjustified peace. It challenges the very foundation of a society built on external validation. It quietly subverts a world that profits from our constant striving for approval. When you refuse to justify your peace, you are not merely making a personal choice. You are participating in a profound act of cosmic remembering. You are aligning yourself with the fundamental nature of reality itself. But here is the thing about a peace that requires no justification. It is not something you achieve. It is something you remember. It is not a destination you reach after a long journey. It is the recognition that you have been standing on your home ground all along, despite your many wanderings. The flower does not apologize for blooming. Now consider what this truly means. It is not that the flower is being stubborn or defiant in its blooming. It is that the flower recognizes in its wordless wisdom that blooming is its nature. To justify blooming would be to introduce doubt into what is inherently doubtless. The mountain stands, vast and immovable, through storm and sunshine alike. Not because it is making a point, but because standing is what mountains do. The universe maintains its perfect balance, not through effort or argument, but through simply being what it is. You see, this is the deeper understanding we come to when we stop justifying our peace to chaotic people. We realize that peace is not a stance we take against chaos. It is our original nature, revealed when we stop engaging with chaos on its own terms. When we set boundaries with those who demand explanations for our tranquility, we are not being unkind. We are simply acknowledging the truth of what is. Your inner state is not a democracy where chaotic people get a vote. It is a sovereignty where you alone determine what enters and what does not. This is not selfish. This is natural law. I knew someone who lived their entire life explaining their choices to a particularly chaotic family. Every gathering became a tribunal where they defended their lifestyle, their values, their very being. The day they stopped justifying was the day their authentic life began. Not because the family changed, but because they no longer made their peace contingent upon the family's understanding. Think about it. When you refuse to justify your peace, you are not being selfish. You are being honest. You are acknowledging the simple truth that your inner state is not something to be litigated by external judges. It is, and always has been, an experience beyond the reach of others' opinions. There is a contemplative practice that emerges naturally from this understanding. When you find yourself beginning to justify your peace, simply notice it. Notice the urge to explain, to defend, to seek validation. Notice it without judgment, without resistance. And then, if you choose, allow that urge to pass without acting on it. Like a cloud moving through the vast sky of your awareness, let it drift by, unimpeded and unfollowed. Another practice is to simply rest in the direct experience of your peace, even for a moment. Feel its texture, its spaciousness, its inherent completeness. Notice how this experience exists prior to any mental justification of it. This direct recognition, more than any argument or explanation, is what allows peace to deepen and stabilize in your life. You see, the universe itself can be our greatest teacher in this. When we observe the natural world, we see that everything simply is what it is, without apology or explanation. The river does not justify its flowing to the rocks that create turbulence. The wind does not defend its direction to the trees it bends. Each element exists in its own truth, allowing all other elements to do the same. This does not mean we never explain ourselves or share our wisdom with others. Explanation offered freely without the need for acceptance can be a beautiful gift. But justification, that desperate seeking of approval, that anxious defense against criticism, that is what disturbs our peace. But here is the thing. When you stop justifying your peace to chaotic people, you offer them a profound gift. You show them, not through argument but through embodiment, that peace needs no defense. Some will be drawn to this strange phenomenon, a tranquility so complete it needs no justification. Others will be threatened by it and double their chaos in response. Your task is not to predict or manage their reaction, but simply to remain, like the mountain. The journey from defended peace to undefended peace is the journey from believing tranquility is something you achieve to recognizing it as something you already are. It is the shift from seeing peace as fragile, requiring constant protection, to experiencing it as the most natural and durable state of being. What if the peace you have been defending so strenuously is not something you need to earn, explain, or justify at all? What if it is simply what remains when you stop trying to convince chaos of your right to be still?